Darren, thank you. When Guatemala ended its long and brutal civil war in 1996, many people hoped the country would rebuild itself based on the rule of law. But now, 14 years later, the country continues to be plagued by violence. Thousands of people are murdered every year. And with police seemingly unable to stem the tide of violence, angry mobs are increasingly taking matters into their own hands. AlJazeera's David Mercer traveled to the city of Panajachel and sent this report.
This was the scene in the Guatemalan highland town of Solola in late November. Two men and a woman accused of shooting dead a local bus driver and his assistant in an attempted robbery. After the suspects were arrested, hundreds of people descended on the police station, demanding the police hand them over. The police released the suspects to the mob. They were then beaten, doused with petrol, and set on fire. 9 days later, in the neighboring town of Panajachel, a man was accused of robbing a street vendor. A mob of hundreds caught the man, dragged him through the streets, and set him on fire in front of the police station. Then they torched the station and 4 police cars. Guatemala has seen a rise in lynchings, as acts of mob violence are called here. The head of the Congressional Commission on Human Rights here in Solola says the increase in lynchings is caused by a loss of confidence in the justice system, as well as the country's violent history.
The
violence that occurred during the 36 years of civil war was stuck in people's minds. The culture of violence is being passed on to the younger generation, and this is the most dangerous thing that can happen.
Across Guatemala, law enforcement are often looked at with suspicion. Many current and former police are suspected of having links with criminal gangs. Earlier this year, an officer was lynched after being accused of extorting a local bus driver. Deputy Mayor Edgar Rodas says this type of distrust certainly contributed to the recent violence.
There have been a lot of corrupt police. The Director General, department heads, and officials whose involvement in corruption, kidnapping, and robberies have been reported in the press.
The firebombing at the police station in Panajachel showed the frustration local people have been feeling with law enforcement. However, Community Relations Officer Mario Velasquez says the public's anger is misdirected and that the police are not wholly to blame for the lack of security in Guatemala.
The people are confused. They think we arrest people and then let them go, but this isn't true. The judges give them their freedom. The police, community leaders, mayors, and judges need to talk to the people and explain the laws and the justice process.
Although the streets of Panajachel and Solola quickly returned to normal, analysts warn there could be a resumption of violence at any moment. If crimes continue to go unpunished, they say that people here will continue to take the law into their own hands. David Mercer, AlJazeera, Panajachel, Guatemala.
Now, the UN Development Program recently published a report that said the murder rate in Guatemala has climbed steadily over the past 10 years. Human rights groups also regularly keep their eye on the number of murders based on news and other reports. Now, in 2009, there were 5,400 reported homicides. That's an average of 15 people killed every day. To put that in context, Mexico has roughly the same murder rate, but its population is nearly 8 times larger than that of Guatemala's. Police say much of the violence is linked to the drug trade and gang activity, but human rights groups claim the state's failure to provide adequate security has prompted a wave of vigilante justice. There's been more than 300 fatal lynchings there since 1996. Well, to talk more about this, Carlos Mendoza is an author and expert on violence in Guatemala. He joins us now live from Chicago. Mr. Mendoza, the UN crime studies put Guatemala among the world's 10 most violent nations. What really is at the root of this problem? Why is vigilantism flourishing?
Well, it is important to make a distinction between 2 types of vigilante activity. One in the eastern side of the country, where we can find the high rates of homicides, and the other type of violence, which is in the type of lynchings in the western side of the country. And both are related with high levels of crimes, unpunished crime, and the absence of the state, basically in terms of police forces, but most importantly, in terms of absence of justice, punishing those who commit a crime.
So is it a lack of a functioning judiciary that seems to be the problem, or is it also socioeconomic factors that are contributing?
Well, we have been with those socioeconomic conditions for many years. I think it's the absence of the state, especially the judiciary. There is a blaming game between the police and the judiciary, trying to blame each other. But it is true that the judiciary is incapable to manage all the crime rates in the country. So people with different cultures are treating the suspects or the criminals, actual criminals, with different types of public punishment. In the eastern side, they kill the suspects with gunshots, but in the western side, they kill them by, forming a mob.
Now, you talk about the different cultures. Are you suggesting the fact that Guatemala does have a very large indigenous population? Is it that this ethnicity factor is part of the problem, that in fact there are sort of different recognitions of the rule of law? Is that what you're suggesting?
Yes, I think so. There is something at the ethnic level. The indigenous population in the western side, they have more social capital, networks, social cohesion that facilitates collective action to provide public goods that the state doesn't provide. When the state neglects justice, the people decide to take justice in their own hands. And there is a discussion among scholars about if this is a problem of a vacuum between the Mayan traditional customary law and the Western Guatemalan state law, or if this is a case of clash of both types of law.
All right, we're going to leave it there. Guatemala expert Carlos Mendoza joining us from Chicago. Thank you.
You're welcome.